No one forecasted that energy that was growing at 2% a year is now expected to grow at 10 to 15% per year.
Welcome back to the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference.
I want to start off with a conversation about this recent meeting at Davos, okay? So President Trump spent roughly 10 minutes at Davos framing a strained electrical grid as a central economic and national security risk of the AI era. And he openly reversed his prior skepticism towards nuclear power. So from your vantage point, how meaningful is the shift in tone, and what specific policy actions would you need to see to conclude that this is more than just rhetoric?
I think it's notable when at an event like Davos, you get political leaders, including President Trump, not just talking about inflation, not just talking about the normal rhetoric we hear politicians at events like that, but to actually talk about electricity, AI, and power needs. This is, I think, a sign of the times we're in. At this most recent Davos, there was incredible amount of attention and focus on electricity demand. So when you kind of put that in perspective, I think you realize how big this AI thematic is. And when you kind of look at the fact that every global leader is focused on it and talking about it as an existential threat to national security and energy security, there's a reason why it's such a focal point. But I would also say one other thing, which is the fact that while President Trump is now very much behind nuclear energy, as he said during his speech, this is very much a bipartisan issue. President Biden was equally supportive of nuclear energy. This is an incredible moment in time where we have bipartisan political support for nuclear energy. And it might be for different reasons. I think the left comes at it maybe more from a decarbonization priority. The right comes at it more for energy security and national security. But do not forget the fact that we have a multi-decade growth projection in front of us for nuclear, and it's on the foundation of bipartisan political support.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. So he also argued that approval timelines must be slashed because the grid is fundamentally unprepared for AI-driven demand. And so with nuclear projects, even under streamlined permitting, it can take years. And so how do you reconcile the urgency of AI electricity demand with the long lead times of nuclear projects being approved, and where does uranium fit within this timing mismatch?
Well, so just for the benefit of the room, right? So when we think about using a ChatGPT search or query, that will take 10 times more energy demand than just a simple Google search. Now multiply that by billions of these queries on a daily basis. And so when we think about what it means to build AI, when we think about what it means to enhance artificial intelligence, it takes a lot of chips. That's why NVIDIA is doing so well. But the chips don't work without energy. And so what is the energy intensity that we're talking about here? Just to put it in perspective, Morgan Stanley has a report out right now that talks about the need for an additional 150 gigawatts over the next 3 years just from data centers. 1 gigawatt, so one data center that would be powered for 1 gigawatt on an annual basis takes the same amount of energy as a city of 2 million people. A city of 2 million people equal to 1 gigawatt, and we're talking about adding 157 gigawatts over the next 3 years. That's $3 trillion in investments, according to Morgan Stanley alone. So one thing we have to realize is that our infrastructure today, our electricity grid today in the West, in the US, in Canada, in Europe, was never built for this. Is not prepared for the level of growth and the level of energy capacity that is needed. And so we're talking about, when we're talking about trillions of dollars, you got to put that in perspective, and there's only one way to do this. That can't just come from government's balance sheets. So where's it coming from? Some of the most successful companies in the history of capitalism, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, Meta, they're committing their humongous balance sheets to these endeavors. And that is, I think, the really unique opportunity here is that this isn't just about what the politicians are signaling. This is about the reality that private sector, public sector, and the balance sheets of some of the smartest, most successful technology companies we've ever known is backing the need to build out the infrastructure and the capacity, not today, like as fast as possible over the next few years, to be able to keep up with the growth projections in AI.
Okay, so thinking about policy, I mean, because it does come back to like policy with timelines and such and reducing regulations, which we had a lot of regulations on this industry for a long time and such. So what's your outlook on what policies need to be passed or implemented to support this demand for uranium, to support the build out of this infrastructure and such? So just curious in what you think from a policy standpoint.
Well, look, I mean, first of all, it's difficult to talk about all the policy in 12 minutes that we have left, but I would say, first of all, I'm here and we'll be at our booth, so feel free to come and talk about that afterwards. But at the end of the day, we have a global pledge today to quadruple nuclear energy by 2050. 23 countries led by the US have signed on to that. We have a presidential order by President Trump in the US, an executive order that was signed last year to quadruple nuclear energy in the US. Excuse me, the global pledge is to triple, the US pledge is quadruple. As you know, Trump always likes to take it a notch higher. And that also means that the industrial base to support that expansion has to keep up. So if we're gonna double, triple, or quadruple nuclear capacity, that means we have to also double, triple, quadruple uranium production, uranium supply. Just like how the chips don't power themselves and they need energy, energy and nuclear energy doesn't just come about out of thin air. It comes out of the energy density embedded in uranium, which is the most energy dense commodity we have in our planet. It's the energy density of uranium that makes this so special. And by the way, as we speak, if you're a gold investor, and I love gold, markets are open. Gold price is over $5,000 an ounce right now. All right?
Hey, give it up for gold.
Silver prices are over $100 an ounce. The uranium price is at $87 a pound. Uranium prices previous highs was in 2007, which was $140 per pound. If we were to normalize the uranium price just for fun to the move in gold, and so we look at it on a gold equivalent basis today from 2007, the uranium price would have to be $1,000 a pound, not $87 a pound. That's incredible headroom, right? And this is what we were just talking about, is the fact that gold and silver are leading the commodity complex higher. But so many metals like uranium haven't made their move yet. And when you adjust their prices for where they ought to be, based on just historically where they've been, to where gold is today, we're talking about multiples higher than where we are today. That's really exciting.
Okay, I want to get your perspective on supply and demand. So what we talked about is there's going to be a huge surge in demand for uranium. So from a supply standpoint, what's your view there on supply?
I think the world's becoming very bifurcated. I think in this bifurcated world, you've got China and Russia on one end, you've got the US on the other end. What's very clear in the US is that they're trying to reshore, re-domesticate the ability to have the control on their own supply chains. Every supply chain of critical minerals, of which uranium has been listed as one, is now the focus of investment of the US government. And we've seen many investments now proactively being made by the US government in rare earth companies, in lithium, in chips company like Intel. And again, this has to do with the fact that the nature of how we see supply chains is changing. The way the US sees the need to control its own supply chains is a total game changer. And so when you look at the US uranium demand, the US consumes about 50 million pounds of uranium annually, but produces less than 4 million pounds today. So over 90% of its requirements are being imported. And it's being imported from countries like Russia and Kazakhstan, countries that are very close to the Russian sort of center of influence, or China. And so the reality is, I see a situation where if you have domestic capabilities and you can produce uranium in the US or in the Western world, you're aligned with these realities that we're talking about. I go back again to NVIDIA, because we're talking about the most valuable company on the planet. For every dollar spent with NVIDIA, the multiplier effect across the ecosystem of AI is about $8 to $10. Every dollar spent on NVIDIA gets an $8 to $10 multiplier effect across the ecosystem. These are fundamental game changers. By the way, going back to the 2007 uranium price, in 2007, we had a $140 uranium price, but we didn't have AI, we didn't have the structural deficit, we didn't have SMRs, we didn't have Russia invading Ukraine, we didn't have this bifurcated world that we live in. We didn't have the growth in the US that's taking place for energy. No one forecasted that energy that was growing at 2% a year forever, for decades, is now expected to grow at 10 to 15% per year. These are things that have not been forecasted, and we're just the sector and the infrastructure we have in the West was never built for this kind of growth. That just means more investments for the next 10 to 20 years.
Okay, so talk to us about Uranium Energy Corp, Uranium Royalty Corp. How are you all positioned to take advantage of this bull market? I mean, Uranium Energy breached over $20 the other day. And, you know, I've been involved in this stock since it was $3, right? And so, is there still room to grow? Obviously, you know, if we still have these supply deficits and such, and uranium's at $87 a pound, and in the prior cycle was at $140 a pound, so there seems like there's still a lot of room to grow, even though some of the shares have increased significantly. So could you speak to that, and could you speak to just how you all are positioned to take advantage of this bull market?
Well, do we have any UEC shareholders in the room? Well, first of all, I want to thank you all if you're a UEC shareholder. Over 20 years ago, UEC was an idea on the back of a napkin, and today the company is the largest uranium mining company in the United States. And what we have done over 20 years is really patiently put together a foundation and platform that allows us to have the American equivalent of what the Chinese and the Russians, or even we have in Canada, like Cameco. The US needs to have its own domestic champion. Doesn't make sense for the US to be importing over 90% of its uranium requirements in this new world order that we're in. And so the work that we've done at UEC was really the hard work that the shareholders participated in, which was when the uranium price was really down and out, when it was around $20 per pound. We completed over $1 billion of acquisitions when the sector was really out of favor. And when the uranium prices went over $60 per pound, we started operations. And when the uranium prices went higher than that, we increased the operations. And recently, we've announced plans to become vertically integrated. So we're not just going to mine the uranium, we're also going to refine it, and we're going to convert it. And we're going to have a full supply chain from mine to conversion to support enrichment. This does not exist in the US today. That's what really excites me about UEC's positioning, is that we're positioned today to be the only vertically integrated American company, from uranium mines in Texas and Wyoming to our planned conversion plant and refining, full supply chain to support enrichment. The balance sheet is strong with over $700 million of cash and liquid assets, no debt. And also, most important thing, we're unhedged. When I sit here and I say the uranium price could go to $150 or $200 or $1,000 per pound, I really believe that, and I'm putting my money where my mouth is. Hence, my company is unhedged. We don't sign contracts with ceilings, which is a practice in this industry, which as an entrepreneur never made sense to me. We want maximum exposure to what we believe will be an unprecedented bull market in uranium, driven by real demand coming from USA, China, Russia. The whole world needs more electricity. and electricity that we need around the clock. You know, this issue of nuclear's ability to generate electricity reliably is very similar to you all. Everyone uses Uber, right? When you order Uber, you want to know the driver is going to show up on time and charge you what it said it was going to charge you. That's what we call base load power. For too long, we've relied on sources of energy like renewables that would be the same as ordering an Uber driver, not knowing when he or she is going to show up, when they're going to drive you to your destination, and how much they're going to charge you. That's literally the idea of renewables. Would you ever order an Uber driver like that? Why would you run your energy systems and infrastructure like that? So for Uranium Energy, our positioning and timing after 20 years of work, I think it's very exciting, very strong. And the ability, again, as a US company that's unhedged, has no debt, and it can ramp up operations is very exciting. Uranium royalty, everyone here is probably familiar with the royalty model that's been done successfully in the gold sector. Uranium royalty is the only company doing that exclusively in uranium. And that's something that, again, allows us to participate with a very different kind of structure in advancing our uranium interests. One royalty company, one focused on this vertical integration from mining to conversion.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. Any final thoughts for the audience? I mean, we have some newer investors here as well, and so just curious if you have any final thoughts for someone that's maybe new to this sector.
Well, listen, I mean, first of all, when you think about Vancouver and where we are, this city is really the true center of entrepreneurship when it comes to natural resources and mining. And this show is the epicenter of where people truly come together to find the companies, find the ideas, find those things that are going to really create value. And so first of all, I applaud the fact that you're all here in this room. I've been coming to this conference consistently for over 20 years. We are in a proper bull market for commodities. And gold and silver are going to lead the way as they are, and that's very exciting. And we haven't seen a proper bull market in commodities for over a decade. This conference wasn't as full as it used to be. It was a bit of a lonely space, and so it's great to have more attention, here. I'd say a huge kudos to the Cambridge House team, the Vancouver Resource, the Martin family, Jay Martin, Joe Martin. These guys have carried this organization for so long. But I would say in the 20 years that I've been doing this, I have never seen a setup like this for commodities, and I've never seen a setup like this for energy. And I'm not just talking about uranium or nuclear, I'm talking about energy. This world of ours that we're in is an energy-hungry world on magnitudes that we have never seen before. This is another industrial revolution. We're in the early innings of this industrial revolution. And I think the energy play and anything that touches this energy complex is something I'd pay very close attention to. As I was mentioning, $3 trillion to be invested over the next 3 years. Every dollar that goes to NVIDIA having a $10 multiplier effect in the ecosystem. And the fact that 1 gigawatt is what one data center needs, equivalent to 2 million in the population city, and we need 125 gigawatts over the next 3 years. These numbers are mind-numbing. And something that, again, I think requires a lot more, hopefully, focus and attention. And we'll do our part when it comes to uranium energy and nuclear to make sure we satisfy this incredible demand.
Yes, well, Amir, I appreciate you for spending your time with us. You all give Amir a round of applause. Thank you for coming on the show.